I became familiar with you by reading your book, The Future You. Fantastic book. I took away some really, really important lessons from it. But one of them is around technology. And so I'm going to read a line or two from it. And then I have a question. We need to understand that any feelings of fear are not of the technology itself, but rather of our own feelings of powerlessness. And so I bring this up because I had a moment. It was at the beginning of this year. I was in the gym. There's a yoga room there. I was stretching. And I had just played around with ChatGPT for the first time. And I truly started to think about how fundamentally AI is going to change life. And I had this moment of fear. And I think a lot of people are experiencing this fear, and it may be because of AI, or it could be other technologies. And then that fear passed. And then I realized, oh yeah, it's a technology, it's a tool, and how you use it is going to be different than the way that I use it. And my strengths are going to allow me to use it in a significant way, and your strengths are going to allow you to use it in a different way. And so I'd like you to talk just for a moment about technology and overcoming this fear of technology.
I think as we think about it, know that that's a way of thinking about it, that it's not about the technology, it's what you will do with the technology, number one. Number two is that feeling of fear. That feeling of fear is really natural because it's a fear of the unknown. And it's not just a fear of the unknown, because what lives in that unknown, in that darkness, is a fear of powerlessness, is a fear of loss of control. And just as you were in the yoga room and thinking about AI, you had this moment where you were making mental leaps, and then you kind of stopped and you kind of go into that unknown. And that unknown is really scary because we don't know what's going on and we don't know what's going to happen, what could, and we could maybe do this, or you could maybe do that, or maybe this might happen. And we get this noise and we go into that unknown and we get fearful because we feel like we're going to lose control over our lives, which is perfect sense. You should be. You should be. But then I go back to you and remember that really that unknown, that dark space, is actually the landscape of innovation. That's actually where we create. We create in that area of the unknown, of that area. Oh, well, what we don't know what's going to happen. Well, that's a good thing. That's where I generally run into that and say, great, well, what could we do with it? In this darkness and in this thing there, it really starts to lighten it up and turns a light on to go, hey, wow. And that's, again, I'm an optimist because I know people build the future. So I get really, really excited about it and say, here's all the things that we can do and do that. And then the third thing I do want to call out as an engineer and a person who does do something called threat casting, which is thinking about possible potential threats. Back to my hammer example, you can't build a hammer that is sufficient enough to build a house that is also not sufficient enough to bash somebody's head in. And so that idea, but the thing is, good news is we're not running around with hammers in our heads. And that's because human beings are incredibly resilient. Right? We have laws that say, no, putting a hammer in somebody's head is not okay. We also have norms and culture that kind of go, even if it wasn't illegal, we're like, don't do that. Like you teach your kids, don't do that. Not because you don't want them to go to jail. It's just, you don't do that. And that's, I think, a thing that's really important is in that fear, we have control, but the control isn't of the technology. It's of the culture and the people and how we bring it into our lives, how we bring it into our personal lives, how we bring it into our families, how we bring it into our cultures. And that, I think, again, that's a point of power that, again, the technology doesn't care. We have to have those conversations. And that's what I always push people then is, number one, don't be fearful. Actually, it's opportunity that you're there. But then the other part is, if you are fearful, let's talk about it. Let's get out there and say, well, what is the future you want? What is the future you want to avoid? And start having those conversations because you get to pick. You have that agency. And in that fear, that helps to push it away, is to see the opportunity, but at the same time to go, okay, well, wait a minute. There are some dark things there. That's okay. But let's talk about them now. Let's just not be afraid and give up our agency for the future. Let's actually dig into it and really talk to people about it.